In the show tonight, we pay our respects and reflect on the life of the struggle icon Mme Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. Good evening and welcome. On Tonight with Tim Modise, we reflect on the towering figure of Soweto, the globally recognized icon of the struggle for freedom in South Africa, Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, who passed away on Monday afternoon after a short stay in hospital. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela became the voice and the face of the fight against apartheid in the 70s when more than 1,000 children were killed following the 1976 uprising, and in the 1980s during the rolling mass action throughout the townships. A young woman who lost her husband to life imprisonment in the early 1960s, Mrs. Madikizela-Mandela was reunited with husband Nelson Mandela in 1990. Much will be said about her, but she inspired many activists around the world. I'm joined by political editor of the Sowetan newspaper, Moipone Malefane, who's with me here in the studio. And Moipone, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Tim.
And I must compliment your newspaper. Well done, guys. Beautiful coverage.
We are doing a good job, and we will continue to honor her up until next week, Saturday, when she will be finally buried.
Yeah, and of course, she was a regular feature in this newspaper, not only recently, but from that time when the newspaper was called The World into the 80s and up to now. And always willing to talk to a lot of journalists. But overall, the coverage so far and the reflections within the newsroom of the Sowetan newspaper, what are you guys talking about? How are you remembering her?
You know, we are talking about her, and we have also taken a decision that we have to celebrate who Mme Winnie was. And personally, I feel her legacy will forever be contested because there are people who believe she did some wrong things. There are people who honestly believe that she was a good person. She was a social worker at heart. She took care of the poor. And even the images that we have in the newsrooms, in our archives, most of them show her going to areas where the poor of the poorest are. And you remember the Buipatong massacre. She was the first to arrive. You remember there's different squatter camps. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, when these places were called squatter camps before they could be called informal settlements. She was there. She used to visit the Tembisa one that is named after her, the Winnie Madikizela-Mandela informal settlement. She was always there. She cared for people, even people around Orlando where she stays. They talk about how she will never turn anyone away. And when you meet her personally, she always embraces people. I call her the great kisser. We've got lots of pictures where she is kissing everyone that she met. It will be leaders, it will be ordinary people, and so on. I think, like I said, her legacy will be contested. She's got people that love, she's got people that do not love. But to show that also the world really cared about her, and also they are celebrating her now. In the US, she's been celebrated. The new AU commissioner who succeeded Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is flying to South Africa to come to the house to pay their respect as the African Union.
Well, you know, like many things in life, you also understand history in sort of hindsight, because in real time, you misunderstand or you take it for granted, right? You have met her in person, I have met her in person, and sometimes, you know, because of some familiarities, oh, well, it's great to be in the same room as Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, but you underestimate the influence she had. On reflection, and you can add, you know, we can think together on this. I was thinking about the influence she had, and what is it that made her such an icon. That when her husband and other activists of the time were arrested, she was relatively young, in her early 20s at that time, right? So she's really never been a married woman who enjoyed life with a husband and raising 2 young children at the time. And in the 60s, nothing was happening that much in terms of resistance in South Africa to apartheid. But in the 70s, when young school kids spontaneously erupted and resisted Afrikaans and were marching, there was no direction from a particular organization. And that's when a person like Winnie Mandela emerges as an influential voice to channel the frustration and anger of those young children. When I mentioned the number of the hundreds that led up to 1,000 by the end of 1980 of children who were killed. An individual like herself stood up and said, this is enough and it cannot go on like this.
Exactly. But I think her activism started way before 76, because if you were to look at some of the pictures that we have in there, the one where she's next to a beetle, that's
yes.
when she was banished to Brandfort.
That's right,
yes. Yeah. And before then, she had been arrested. She will be taken in at night by police. There's a story, there's a quote, I think, where she talks about how the police came and she had to leave her young children, and both her daughters were clinging on her, pulling her with her skirt to say, Mama, Mama, where are you going? And I had to leave them. There was nothing that
yes.
I could do. And also there are other, like, several stories, but most important is how she carried on, how she took on the Afrikaners. There's a picture of her that has been played on TV where she is fighting the Afrikaners, where she's pushing a white lady. At the time, she had to fight because they wanted to arrest her, and she had to defend herself all the time. She had to learn how to say, I am protecting myself and I'm protecting the people of South Africa.
I suppose that for those who are very critical of her or may wonder why she's such a loved personality and highly respected, is notwithstanding the abuse that was meted out to her, being held in solitary confinement, being detained without being prosecuted or sentenced by any courts, being woken up in the middle of the night, all sorts of things happening. She continued to be a defiant person in the face of all that. She was not cowed down. She actually inspired people to rise up against apartheid when they did not have any confidence or inspiration to do so.
Hence, the ANC silenced her. She remained defiant even after 1990, when the ANC was unbanned. The reason, and some people have also spoken to that people stood against her when she wanted to contest to be the deputy president of the ANC in 1997 in Mafikeng. Mme Winnie remained popular, but she was blocked. She was pushed by Thabo Mbeki to make a decision within no time, when she was saying, can we adjourn and I go consult? And then she was told, no, that cannot happen, we need an answer. That's why I think she declined. If she had accepted and won the position, we would maybe be having a different South Africa, where she became a deputy president and later the president of the republic. I think how she operated could have been different from how the rules that were being applied by those who were from exile and those that were from prison. She has been a fighter, and she kept that spirit even after the ANC was unbanned and after the ANC became the first democratic government. This morning on TV, Tim Modise was being interviewed and made an example of how Tata Nelson Mandela phoned, wanted, when he was about to fire her when she was deputy minister, I can't remember of what, and then she related a story of how they went to her to say, please go ask for forgiveness because he's about to fire you. He said, I have done nothing wrong. And when Tata Nelson Mandela was going to divorce Mme Winnie, spoke again to Tim Modise to say, that's what she related on TV, that Tata Mandela phoned her to say, tell your mother not to contest the divorce. And Winnie said, she can go ahead, but I will not give the divorce. I'm going to fight. So she was a fighter, and this is because of how she lived during apartheid. And I think the ANC did not understand her. In December, when she walked into the room at the ANC conference, people erupted into a song, Dumela Winnie Mandela, Reaurata Winnie Mandela. Everybody was happy wherever she went in the ANC, regardless of how people tried to block her because of what she stood for or how people received her. She will always come out outstanding.
Well, the other interesting thing about Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela is that she's not only popular with those who know her life story from the 70s, the 60s, the 80s, she remains a popular figure even today, an inspirational figure to many young people, and we'll be talking to them in a moment to find out how Winnie Mandela inspired the student movement now in 2016, 17, and 2018. We continue to pay our respects and tribute to Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, and now we are joined by one of the activists of the Wits Fees Must Fall, Dr. Gloria Mothapo. She's with us in the studio now, and I'm still with the political editor of the Sowetan here, Moipone. We continue our conversation. Gloria, welcome. Pleasure to have you with us. This is a beautiful cover of the newspaper, I think. And of course, the coverage is superb inside the newspaper. But for yourselves as young students, you know, when you were rising up on campus, calling for fees to fall, how much of an inspiration was Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela for you guys?
She played a very big role in us vocalizing what it is we wanted. The Fees Must Fall campaign came at a time where it was seen as if it's just a disturbance, you know. The university has run the way it's run for years. The government cannot afford free education. A lot of things that we were told that it's impossible. And she's one woman who did not agree to the fact that things are impossible. She stood for what she believed and she was very vocal. She was unapologetic about being vocal about that. So our entire movement was surrounded by her strength and her resilience, and we identified with
Well, somehow there are always young people around her. You know, even when you go back to the past, I refer to 1976, that a lot of people looked up to her for inspiration and direction, because at the time, as we know, leaders were in exile and some were on Robben Island. So it was just, to my mind, largely a spontaneous uprising of young people who needed direction, and she was there to provide some. And wherever these things, and people like Julius Malema say that they draw inspiration from her. Peter Mokaba in the past, again, was saying the same. What's your view about the fact that she has or had a particular appeal, particularly to young people, Winnie Mandela?
You know, I think it's because she opened her home to all these young people. Remember, some of them, their parents left, or some became activists at a young age, and the parents were confused and did not understand what they were doing and why were they getting involved in this dangerous game where the apartheid regime will come and look for them at their homes and beat them up. So I think Winnie Mandela's home was the home where they could safely go and stay. For instance, when I spoke to Tokyo Swale, told me that at a very young age, he was staying by Winnie's home. Winnie's the one who inspired him to say, you join the struggle, and other young people like Yofikile Mbalula and so on. And also apart from that, COSAS, which is an organization for young people at is it universities or primary and high schools. Most of the presidents of COSAS were very, very close to Winnie. I think she understood how to use young energy and mold them into being leaders. Yesterday, Julius said a very important thing, because most of his members are young people. He told them, this is your home. You must come and mourn Mama Winnie. We need to get the details of the memorial service. We need to get the details of the funeral. We must attend the funeral. Mama Winnie was the mother of the nation. She was our mother. Even ANC leaders that do not see eye to eye with Julius Malema, in their pieces, in their interviews, they are acknowledging the special relationship that she had with Julius Malema. So I think because she understood and her home was open to young people, that is why she managed to have all of them around her.
I just want to pick up on something you said earlier on, and then we come back to the young people. You said the ANC as an organization had a difficult relationship on many occasions with Mrs. Winnie Mandela, including when the organization was unbanned, including the time when she tried to stand as the deputy president of the organization. Why do you think that was the case? And was peace ever made with her within the organization?
I think it's because she spoke openly. All of them, when they have problems and they are in trouble, they will run to her for advice. And she will be honest about what is, how they must resolve their issues. Look at December conference. All people that were contesting went to see her, to talk to her. All of them, they wanted her approval. But when people like, they rally behind a particular leader and she starts speaking out, then they will be angry. But after 1994, I think more than anything, it was about her and how she has been running things. There were certain things she didn't want to be told in terms of how to do certain things. And if you were to recall, at some point, UDF before 19, I'm not sure whether it happened after the unbanning or just when the unbanning, the year towards the unbanning of all political parties around 1990, they distanced themselves from her activities. So they wanted her to operate within the world of men, to be told by men what to do. But Winnie said, I am Winnie Mandela and I know with my mistakes, with the positive things that I have done, I'll remain Winnie Mandela. I will not be told what to do. I think it was more of not being able to operate and being instructed by men.
I'll come to that. And then in terms of, you know, being a young woman yourself, because she's also seen as a good representation and inspirational figure for women to stand up for themselves. Is that how you see her, and how is she viewed by your colleagues as well?
I definitely see her as an inspiration for young women. I see her as a person who was was able to identify with everyone, and she identified very early that the future does belong to the youth, you know, to the young child. And I think that's why she was able to open her home to young people, because she realized that actually that's where the future was. The other thing that I identify with her personally is the fact that she was a medical social worker, you know, at Baragwanath Hospital when she came into Johannesburg. And she was one of the first black women actually in the hospital to have such a qualification. And that happened almost 60 years ago, and we're still in an age today where women are still walking into doors for the first time, you know, and we celebrate that, but it shouldn't be something that we should celebrate. You know, I feel like we're still not where we should be as black women, and I identify with the fact that she remained committed despite the whole her whole surrounding telling her not to be, you know, telling her not to be strong. I love how she vocalized the fact that she was strong in an era that I think women weren't expected to be as strong as she was, you know, and she's allowed us also to exist in spaces that are still not very welcoming to the black female, you know, corporate, the health sector, but she was able to still be herself in a society that wasn't welcoming to her. And she's allowed us to also be ourselves in a society that isn't necessarily welcoming to us as black women.
Most definitely, and that cannot be taken away from her contribution. But I want to come back to you, Moipone, on particularly the ANC views of her, including the UDF towards the end of the 80s, how they viewed her, that she was operating outside the organizational or party structures. But organizations would see that not only as defiance, but as ill discipline, and would say, you know, that's part of her flaws, that she was not necessarily a disciplined member of a liberation formation such as ANC or as the UDF.
I don't think she was ill-disciplined. I believe Winnie knew what people needed. Winnie wanted to help people in squatter camps and so on. And as we know, after 1994, the first government, there was something that was called gravy train. Winnie didn't taste that gravy train because she remained with the people because of her beliefs. So some will say she was ill-disciplined, and as other people like Tony Ngeni wrote on Twitter account that we see crocodile tears when people didn't like her. and some didn't even want to be associated with her. That is true. We may not know the deep, deep things of exactly what happened where and how, but the factions in the ANC treated her differently. Despite the people liking her, she was more liked by the people. She will have a party for crannies in Orlando. She did a lot for people, but all the time, the people that have been saying negative things about her on Facebook, they refer to the Stompie issue. She never killed Stompie. The court found out, she was found guilty on a charge of kidnapping, not that she murdered Stompie. That was wrong. However, there are many good things. Out of 100%, I think her flaws will just be 30%, and the 70% she sacrificed for South Africans.
Well, she's a global icon, and a South African, especially in the context of the struggle for freedom overall, and an inspiration for young people. As a young person, and when you interact with other activists, how would you remember Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, and how would you like the world to understand her?
I will always treasure the fact that she was real. You know, we live in a world where being real can be called fake, can be called ill-disciplined, but she was real, and I respect that about her. I'll always remember the fact that she identified with everyone. She identified with our struggle in the times of Fees Must Fall. And you could say that it wasn't an issue that affected her, but because it was a genuine issue amongst the youth, she identified with that. And last but not least, she was a woman who was proud of being black. She's allowed us to feel comfortable to be black and beautiful, that beauty shouldn't necessarily be defined as very Western. At the same time, she was a woman who was strong, and she showed us that you don't have to be manly to be powerful. And I think she was able to balance that so well.
Very briefly, Moipone, and from your point of view, how should we remember her?
I'll remember all the good things that she did, the beauty, her beautiful clothes. I will remember how she fought for the poorest of the poor. I'll remember how she was the first to arrive when black people are suffering. It's unfortunate we have lost her, and you know, we cannot even reverse the years, you know, to say, let's start from 1994 and see what Mama would have done for us. Let's cherish and remember her for being who she was and being one of us.
Moipone Malefane, thank you very much, the political editor of the Sowetan newspaper, and Dr. Gloria Mothapo, thank you very much, one of the activists of the Fees Must Fall movement over the past few years. We were remembering Mrs. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, the face, the voice, the icon of struggle. And historians will remember this, that during the gap years, if one may call them that, the 30 years where the organizations were banished or leaders were in prison, Winnie Mandela was the voice and the channel through which the frustrations and the aspirations of the black masses were articulated. She is no more. She is going to be buried on the 14th of April, memorial service to be held on the 10th. Is it the 10th? Let me get my facts right. The 11th of April. And all of these events will be taking place in Johannesburg. And that's all we had for you on the show tonight. And from us, good night to you.